All right, people, it's confession time. All summer long, I have been driving around with an awning, a set of Max Tracks, and an empty fuel can mounted to my bed rack. Now, I don't always do this. There's plenty of videos where you can see my bed rack kind of barren, but for the last few months, they've been there. On top of that, over the last 5 months, I've only spent a total of 8 nights in my tent. Hopefully there'll be a 9th night next week, but only 8 nights over 5 months. And that tent would be my iCamper SkyCamp 2.0, which is a gigantic 4-person sleeper. And over the past 2 years, it's only been me up there ever since my wife and I went to Colorado. But since then, it's just been me. So all these things considered, I kind of feel like I've got a little bit of imposter syndrome. Do you feel like you have imposter syndrome? Because I've got news for you. You are not an imposter. And in this video, I'm going to share some of my reasons as to why I believe that. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Varsity Overland channel. My name's Ken, and this is another Tailgate Talk episode. And today's topic of discussion is being an overland imposter, or imposter syndrome, so to speak. And for those of you that don't really understand the concept or haven't heard it before, imposter syndrome just means you're kind of, at some point or another, find yourself in a space where you believe the space is occupied by a lot of experts and you would not qualify yourself as said expert. Yet people might look to you, people might ask you for advice or whatever. So you kind of feel like you are an imposter. You are not in a space where you feel like you know enough to belong. And I absolutely feel that way in a lot of different situations, especially seeing as how I am a content creator, offering my advice and offering a lot of insight as to my experiences with the overland community. So the overland imposter syndrome, I feel like, is very common. So what I'd love to do right off the bat is, if you feel like there's something about your overland style that you might have a slight insecurity of, or you feel a little bit like, you're an imposter, I want you to drop it down below. I would love to see which of us, can demonstrate a little bit of bravery or a little bit of courage and expose something that might be, a little triggering for you or a little insecure for you. I want you to comment down below and share that thought. Maybe you might feel like an overland imposter because, despite all of your travels, you might have never ventured all the way across the country, to the other coast. Or maybe you don't ever leave your home state or your home region, like for me, it'd be the Northeast, for example. Maybe you feel like an imposter because you don't have a tent. Maybe you feel like an imposter because you don't go wheeling as often as you'd like to, or you don't have as many modifications on your vehicle as, you see some other overlanders have. Whatever your reason, comment down below. What is your reason why you might feel slightly like an imposter? And then I'd love the rest of us, myself included, I'm definitely going to do this. I would love the rest of us to respond to your comment. Let's all respond to each other's comments and build each other up. Let's come up with compliments. Let's come up with reasons why, each one of us should not feel insecure about this, why we are not imposters, why we are not doing it wrong, so to speak. I feel like the internet, YouTube, social media, we're all really good at breaking each other down and, giving each other reasons why we're not doing it right, or why we're not true overlanders, or why this or why that, and it's all bad stuff. Let's come up with good stuff. Let's come up with awesome compliments. Let's build each other up. So if you comment down below and you tell me something that, you feel like might make you an overland imposter, I will tell you otherwise. I will tell you why you're not an overland imposter. So things that make me feel like an imposter. I'm sharing my insecurities. I'm sharing my thoughts here. Things that make me feel like it are everything I mentioned earlier. It's been all summer and I've only slept in the tent a couple times. The trips that I've gone on recently have only been in the local region. I've gone to Vermont, I've gone to Maine, I've gone to Massachusetts, right? And then I've done a lot of exploring in Connecticut. But a lot of my recent Connecticut videos have proven that despite there being a lot to see as far as like back road driving, there certainly isn't a lot of technical trails, and there's definitely no wild dispersed camping. So, a lot of people comment on my Connecticut videos and say Connecticut's not really a great state to be overlanding in because of those reasons. Now, I've got a lot of positivity on those Connecticut videos as well, and if you're someone who's commented with a positive comment about Connecticut, I really appreciate that. I'm really just trying to share my experience, and sometimes you can't venture across the country, in order to go overlanding. We're all adults. We all got day jobs. We all have, things that tie us to a specific area. So you got to be realistic every once in a while. Recently, I was at an event in Massachusetts at one of the Ineos Grenadier dealerships. And while I was at the event, there were a couple people who recognized me or recognized my truck. Let's be honest, the truck is definitely more recognizable than I am. Or had seen my videos or whatever, and they came up to me. Some of them are people I've met before. Some of them are people I was meeting for the first time. And they're like, "Oh, hey, Ken. Oh, hey, Varsity Overland. Like, awesome. Oh, it's so great to finally meet you." And I enjoyed it, by the way. If you do this, if we ever meet in person, I love it. It's cool. I'm not complaining for a second. But sometimes the conversation leads in a direction where I don't feel as knowledgeable as I should be. You know what I mean? So like people might start asking questions about the truck, or people might start asking questions about just, I don't know, maybe mechanical stuff, technical stuff, geographical stuff like mapping and this and that. And for the moment, I feel like, oh no, they're asking questions that I don't have answers to, but I'm supposed to have answers because I'm this YouTuber. And needing to know that information that they're talking about, or needing to have the answers to the questions they're asking. So that's when I tend to feel like I have imposter syndrome. I'm slowly coming to terms with the fact that I don't have to have all the answers, and there's really nothing wrong with saying, "Dude, I have no idea what you just said. I'm so sorry. I'm not," because I don't ever want to come across as like I'm faking to be something. So I'm just going to be like, "Hey, that component in the engine you were just talking about, gotta be honest, never heard that word before." Maybe some people will be able to relate to that. That is the purpose of my channel, by the way, is to prove that you don't have to be a gearhead. You don't have to be like a, seasoned expedition leader in order to just overland and explore, So I guess it would make it more relatable to viewers. Something else that happened at that Ineos Grenadier dealership event was I met someone that I've been following on social media for a while. Evan, if you're watching, it was awesome to finally meet you in person. But Evan has an awesome, Toyota Tacoma build with an Alucab camper on the back, and we finally met up in person because we've been talking back and forth a little bit on Instagram. And he pulls up and he parks his truck. He gets out of his truck, comes right up to me, and points at my truck and goes, "Dude, your build, man, this truck looks so good." And in that moment, I was like, I looked at my truck and then I looked at his truck, and I'm trying to figure out how my truck would even compare to what he's built. And I feel like some other people, you might be able to relate to this. It was a really funny moment because I turned to him and I went, "My truck? Look at your build. Oh my gosh. Like, you could live out of that thing for weeks if you want to, like my wife and I did live out of this truck for 5 weeks in a row while we traveled, across the country, but it definitely wasn't as either convenient or as livable. The space wasn't as livable as something like a Alucab bed camper, that he had. So it was a very funny moment to me. And it was a moment where I kind of felt like I might have had a little imposter syndrome, because I don't know. I didn't feel like I lived up to the hype that he was saying the truck was, And Evan, I appreciate the compliments. It was awesome. Can't wait to see you again. But it was just a laughable moment, in my mind. Now, I'd like to kind of loop back to the original comments I was making about all the gear strapped to the truck and just talk about the actual truck for a second, and how, your choice of overland vehicle or your build, your length of your overland build can still make us kind of feel like imposters every once in a while. So looking back through all my content, I noticed that a lot of my content recently, the trails or the back roads or the areas I was exploring with this vehicle did not really require the level of build that the vehicle is, you know? So like, for example, 2 weeks ago when I was exploring the back roads of Connecticut and just made a video about like a day of sightseeing, essentially, you definitely don't need a Colorado ZR2 with an Eibach lift to do that. You know what I mean? You know, if I'm being honest, the last trip or last adventure that I did that really warranted the level of build that this truck is was probably back in April when I did the Allegheny Discovery route with my buddy Jeremy. And it was really only like the tail end of that route where the truck was really put to the test, you know, on the final day of the trip. And if I'm being honest, the most stressful parts of that trip were when I was really being challenged with the off-road terrain. But since April, you know, right now it's August, I haven't needed the level of build or the level of suspension and lift and tires and ground clearance and all that stuff that this vehicle provides. Now, overlanders, myself included, love to have the rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it mindset, you know. So that's kind of the way that we justify having a winch, having max tracks, having the spare fuel can, you know, all that stuff. But if you kind of like look through your history of the last time you've used these things, and you find more often than not you're choosing to explore in areas where those parts or those components aren't necessary, that can definitely make you feel like an imposter. And that makes me feel like an imposter every once in a while as well. You know, sometimes I don't want to challenge the truck and risk, you know, denting it or get pinstripes and all that stuff. I don't have a problem with that necessarily, but sometimes I just want to take a gentle drive through the woods, you know, in something that a Toyota RAV4 could have been able to do, you know? So when I post content like that, more often than not, it does make me kind of feel like an imposter. Now, I did kind of start the video by saying that I'm going to give you a reason to feel like you're not an imposter. And here's my reasoning. If you have not read, purchased, seen this book by Scott Brady, Overlanding 101, I highly recommend it, okay? And I am not much of a sit down and read every night kind of guy, but I have sat down and read this book every night since I bought it about 2 weeks ago. I just skimmed through a couple pages, end up jotting stuff down in my journal or making notes in my phone about things that I learned from this book. It is incredible and I'm loving it. And I'm going back to other sections and I'm rereading things and it's like, it's really cool. There's even sections that they call Notes from the Road where he tells a story about either success or failure or whatever from his journeys. It's incredible. It's really inspiring, and I've learned a lot. But what I've learned is the way Scott Brady defines overlanding in this book is actually contrary to the way a lot of the public defines overlanding. I think the general person would just say overlanding is a combination of off-road travel and then camping at a really, you know, scenic destination. Maybe you travel very far as well in order to do it. But the way that he describes it is it doesn't even have to involve camping. You know, it doesn't even have to involve a harsh off-road trail. It's really more about exploration in a space that you have never been to before, you know, or a hard to reach destination, right? And if you can throw in an emphasis of like, you know, scientific discovery or environmental protection, then that's even better. That's even closer to like a true sense of overlanding that he would describe. So here's the reasoning that I have. If you take the general public's idea of overlanding, and then you take Scott Brady's idea of overlanding, and you combine them, technically, there's no wrong way to do it. And that is exactly why you are not an overland imposter. That's why I'm not an overland imposter. There's no wrong answer, essentially. You know, I've had people comment in some of my videos and say, you know, that this quote overland trip was just visiting some scenic touristy destinations and then camping in the woods, and they'd be like, that's not overlanding. But you know, there's no wrong way to do it, and I don't really have a problem with however you define overlanding, and I think that is the key. We can do it any way we want. I used an analogy in a previous video about running, because I'm an avid runner. I've been a runner since I was 14 years old. And I don't nitpick people who jog 2 times a week if they describe themselves as a runner. And I think that's something really important. Maybe you think it's a stupid analogy, but I feel like however you define yourself as an overlander, congratulations, you are an overlander, right? I mean, Scott Brady says in his book, you don't even have to camp. You can use like lodges or even hotels, you know, if you have to, while you're exploring and adventuring. And technically, you're still an overlander. And I love that, right? So there's really no wrong answer, and there's really no wrong way to do it. And therefore, we are all overlanders. And yeah, so I really hope that's positive news for you, right? So if you haven't yet, comment down below. Tell me why sometimes you feel like an overland imposter. If there's anything in my video that I brought up that you disagree with, I am open to those discussions as well. Remember, not an expert, hence the whole imposter syndrome thing. I'm just sharing my opinion and then also sharing my experiences that I've had over the 4 years of doing this. So I appreciate you watching. If you haven't yet, check out my Vermont video from last week. It was a solo adventure where I got to bring my dog. I've been trying to solo adventure a little bit more. There's also a main video from a few weeks before that. So check those out if you haven't yet. Subscribe, and I will see you next time. Peace, people.